Spooky season is upon us, and there are a couple of schools I think should be worried about the spooky season upset alert because there have been a lot of teams who have not handled their business through October. And so those teams need to have backs against the wall mentality, make sure that we don't get snuck up upon. And then there are schools that have taken care of business, that have not had the letdown. And it is generally, as you can see by the results year after year after year, you generally don't get through the schedule without a letdown, without a egg on your face. How in the hell did that happen? Game. And I think that there are three schools who might be in that spot this week. And the first is Miami. I have long said that I don't know how good the Hurricanes are as much as I know how bad the schedule is. And they've done everything that anybody has asked of them. They have shown up week after week after week after week, and they are the fifth ranked team in the country. But they've got Duke at home on Saturday. And Duke's coming off a very tough luck loss. A really tough luck loss where they went for two in a situation where it's easy to second guess what they should have done, could have done, but they did not win at home against SMU. And Miami is coming off a big emotionally charged win over Florida State last week after they had been in two absolute dog fights the weeks before, where they struggled and probably you could argue should not have beat Virginia Tech, that they got help from the officials. I think it was abundantly clear that that wasn't a we're not rehashing that. And then they went to Cal and won. I beg your pardon. It's the last 3 we they got a one-score game against Louisville, a one-point game against Cal, and a four-point game to Virginia Tech. They have had a run here of emotionally charged games where I think this is a point where you can be susceptible to a letdown, that after week after week after week, you have 3 difficult games where it takes everything you got to get a win, then you just beat the dog crap out of your biggest rival. It's real easy to then look at the schedule and go, "Oh, all right, we got Duke. We are playing Duke." But I don't think that it's that simple. Duke comes in with Manny Diaz as their head coach, who probably would love to stick it to Miami. So I'm not saying Duke is going to beat Miami. I am saying Miami cannot afford a letdown against Duke. Now, I think they still probably get into the college football playoff, even if they have a letdown against Duke, because there are going to be a lot of teams that have a letdown on their resume. But this is one of those spots where you've played difficult games for a month straight, and it's real easy to go, we weathered that storm. We can get through Duke. And it is not your father's Duke team. Duke is 6-2, and their loss is to SMU, who has a loss, and they lost by 10 at Georgia Tech. Is it the like murderer's row of a college football schedule? No, but they're already bowl eligible. Duke is not a pushover by any stretch of the imagination, and Miami needs to treat them as such. There's another ACC game that I think needs to be looked at from a letdown perspective, and that's Clemson. I don't think you can argue Clemson has had a letdown. Clemson got beat badly by one of the best teams in the country the first week of the season. I don't think that's a letdown. They lost to a team that was better than them. Now, they had a disastrous second half in that letdown. That I guess in that not letdown. In that game, they had a bad second half. Well, you know what? Georgia's had a really bad first half. Alabama's had a bad game. Ohio State's had a bad game. Michigan's had 5 bad games. Like, the idea that Clemson has had a letdown or has Clemsoned thus far this season is not true. Since they have played Georgia, since they had that bad, disastrous second half, they have handled their business. They have been the best team in the ACC, in my opinion. And they've got Louisville on Saturday. And I know that that didn't move the needle probably a whole lot for Clemson fans. Louisville is 5-3. They've lost each of those 3 games by 1 score. So they have been within striking distance. And the 3 teams they've lost to have a combined 2 losses. Louisville has lost to Notre Dame, Miami, and SMU. SMU has a loss to BYU, who's probably going to make the college football playoff, and they lost to Notre Dame, who's probably going to make the college football playoff, and they lost to Miami, who's probably going to make the college football playoff. So while Louisville is 5-3, and nobody wants to be 5-3, they are a good football team. So again, I think Clemson, they haven't been tested since that week 1 or the opening game against Georgia. They have not faced a real big challenge, which you can argue, like, is it because you're the best team in the ACC? I think that the answer to that question is yes. I think Clemson is the best team in the ACC. So a letdown would be shocking because you're the best team in the ACC and you haven't had that letdown, but everybody's kind of due for one throughout the season. Now, I think Clemson is benefited by the fact that it's a home game, it's a night game, that place will be electric. But Louisville is not just a pushover, is not a slouch by any stretch of the imagination, even if they have 3 losses. I don't think I would not be absolutely floored if Louisville won that game. I also wouldn't be floored if Clemson beats them 45-6 either. The last game in the upset alert special is Indiana at Michigan State. Each week, it feels like we ask the question, all right, is this the week that the Cinderella run for Indiana ends? Is this the week that we finally learn that Indiana is a fraud rather than the upstart team that everybody's going to love as an underdog? I think Michigan State is the best team that Indiana has played thus far, which I think says a lot about Indiana's schedule through the first 8 weeks of the college football season. Because I don't think Michigan State is great. I don't I think you could argue whether or not Michigan State is good. But I think they are the best team that Indiana in their Big Ten schedule of UCLA, Maryland, Northwestern, Nebraska, Washington. If you wanted to argue that Nebraska is better than Michigan State, we can have that conversation. And Indiana beat the doors off of Nebraska. But Indiana's on the road to East Lansing. And I think Michigan State is the best team Indiana has played. Michigan State's coming off a difficult loss where they probably should have some kids suspended, but they didn't because the Big Ten said, you know what? Nobody gets nothing. Nobody is punished for anything that they did in this very brief melee against Michigan, which is probably the right decision at the end of the day. But Michigan State can go one of 2 ways. They can come off a loss to their big rival where they were emotionally charged to the point where they were throwing haymakers at dudes. You can come off that and say, we're going to ruin Indiana's season. We're going to ruin their chances to make the college football playoff. We are going to be the reason that they think about what might have been. Or Michigan State can pack their tents up, go home, play out the rest of the season, just going through the motions, and end year 1 of the Jonathan Smith era on a bit of a losing streak that you wonder whether things are super improving in that program or not. I think really highly of Jonathan Smith, to tell you the truth. I don't think he's going to allow that to happen. So I think in my bones that Michigan State has a response. that they've gotten growth from Aiden Childs where he's not going to necessarily beat himself every single week, or he's not going to be the cause. He's shown flashes of playing really, really well. And I think they put that all together and beat Indiana on Saturday. Also, in Michigan State's favor, they might need this game to get to bowl eligibility because their final three after they play Indiana is they're at Illinois, which is probably a loss, and then home for Purdue, which is probably a win, and then Rutgers at the end of the season. Final game of the year, they play Rutgers at home. That is not a guaranteed win by any stretch of the imagination. Is Rutgers performing well in the Big Ten? No, they are 1-4, but it's not a guaranteed win. So a win against Indiana would go a long way in Michigan State going to a bowl game in year number one under Jonathan Smith. I think they beat Indiana on Saturday because that just feels as if because Indiana is setting up for playing Michigan and then at Ohio State versus Purdue to end the season. Those are four games that they're going to have to be up for each and every one of them. And they have been up for each and every one of them through the first 8 games of the season. And when you think that I just the chances of Indiana, of IU football being one of the teams in America that gets through the regular season unscathed with no letdowns, with no what in the hell happened there games feels really low. So I'll say that I think this one is the one that things unravel and they face some adversity in year number one under Kurt Signetti. Let me know your thoughts. Who do you think is on upset alert? Did I peg one of the games wrong? Do you think that Miami doesn't have anything to worry about against Duke or Louisville's going to get beat they're going to just get dominated by Clemson? Let me know your comments in the comments down below. Let's have that conversation. That'll do it for today's episode of the Daily Huddle. Appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you get all the great college football content we are pumping out. If you listen on the podcast feed, drop a 5-star review. Goes a long way in helping out the channel. I'll see you tomorrow for another episode of the Daily Huddle.